What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me for another video where today we're going to talk a little bit about the draft, right? We've talked so much about free agency. Let's switch that tone up a little bit, right? With the combine coming up, there's some interest or the combine happening. There's some interesting things that have come up at the beginning of this week. I think one of the more interesting things is, hey, we're planning on talking to Ashton Jeanty, and I think this is more just us doing our homework. But anything can happen, right? And I think going into the draft, it's interesting. The more I think about it, the more the idea of possibly drafting him change, right? Because this is a guy that's probably going to be a first round pick if I had to guess. So at the end of the day, like we just have to spend a large draft capital or large draft pick on him. Right, we're picking pick 14. We could maybe drop back, maybe we'd even have to go up to get a guy like that. But I wanted to make a video because, again, at first it would seem far-fetched, and I think a lot of Colts fans don't like the idea of that. But I just wanted to lay out the case of why I think it could actually be a really good idea if you end up going and getting Ashton Jeanty, right? And I want to take. I know this is far-fetched. The Lions have been one of the best teams in the NFL for the last couple of years, but I want to use them as the model. And I think that's appropriate because obviously before they took off, they was sputtering. They were really sputtering. And then they went and they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and they got better. Now, obviously, there were some other things that had to happen. They signed David Montgomery also, but having that pairing, I think that was massive for him. A team that builds the offensive line, I think that's massive for him. So when you look at it, again, using the Lions as a model because they've been one of the worst sports franchises in history, and we're at a point in Colts history where it's so up and down. It's not like the worst point in Colts history, but when you're stuck in this middle ground, it really is almost worse than just being terrible for a year or two and then getting enough high draft picks to be able to get out of it. We can't do that. We keep drafting between 14 and 20, and we're not able to help ourselves enough. So I think if a guy like Ashton Jeanty is sitting there at 14 with the needs on the team, the things that we've talked about, maybe you do go get a guy like Ashton Jeanty. Now, is that far-fetched? Yeah, it might be. Right? Are we going to draft a running back in the first round? That seems kind of crazy. When you think about some of the other needs that we have on the team, that seems kind of crazy. But again, using the Lions as a team that we're going to look at, right? I want to go and look at kind of the comparison between running backs real quick. When you look at the prospect info here for Jahmyr Gibbs on NFL.com, 5'9", 199. Okay, then you look at Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is 5'9", 215. That's what it says on ESPN. Then you look at Jahmyr Gibbs. He was drafted 12th overall, right? Where the Colts sit at 14 could draft Ashton Jeanty. Now, I think it's important when you talk about drafting him, right? You have to put the context on the fact that you have Jonathan Taylor. So Jeanty, are you going to spend a first-round pick on a backup running back? That's the discussion. Okay, but again, we want somebody, whether it's free agency or the draft. I would like us to get somebody that could really work as an actual tandem, right? Like Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, like a real tandem, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, and be able to work together like that. And I think Jonathan Taylor with what he's put out, and then you add Ashton Jeanty to that with the possibility of what he can do. And I think our run game is going to be maybe like competing for one of the best in the NFL, right? We had Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. As long as Anthony Richardson's on the field, like our run game should be better anyways. Jonathan Taylor, 303 carries in 2024, 1,431 yards, 11 touchdowns. That's with Anthony Richardson not always in the lineup. That's with his backups being Tyler Goodson, Trey Sermon. So I don't even remember who the other one was, but it would be a step up, obviously, in the running back room, at least in my opinion, to go get Ashton Jeanty. So it'll be interesting as we go forward, right? And also one of the cases for this, right? When you look at Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, you look at the stats that they have over the first 2 years with Jahmyr Gibbs in the league. Jahmyr Gibbs in year one had 182 carries, 945 yards, 10 touchdowns. I mean, transformed that offense, while Dave Montgomery sits here with 219 carries, 1,015 yards. So almost had two running backs with 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 23 touchdowns between the two running backs. Just a dominating run game. And the run game that they've put together, it helps Jared Goff be able to do what Jared Goff has been able to do with the Lions. Jared Goff looking like the best version of himself. The run game that's there, the support that he has is a massive reason why that's able to happen, right? Because when you look at this past year, 2024, Dave Montgomery missed a little bit of time, still had 185 carries, 775 yards, 12 touchdowns, 25 touchdowns in 2 years with the Lions for David Montgomery. And that's Jonathan Taylor for us. And Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion, Jonathan Taylor is a better running back than David Montgomery. David Montgomery, very good. He is on a dynasty league team. I think highly of David Montgomery. I'm not, saying he's bad or anything, but obviously by the numbers. But I do think Jonathan Taylor is better. Then when you go get Ashton Jeanty, is he gonna? I don't know if he's better than Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think when you think about the combination of the two, it would be incredible. Jahmyr Gibbs this past year, 250 carries, 1,412 yards. So he came 19 yards short of Jonathan Taylor on what would that be? That's 53 less carries, average 5.6 per carry, where Jonathan Taylor was at 4.7. Obviously, that Lions offensive line is incredible. One of the best in the NFL. A real hard-nosed bunch. And the Colts invested heavily in their offensive line. It was good for a few years. Time to rebuild, and I think we did rebuild it. Obviously, these guys got to grow into it, but I think this offensive line has the capability of being a nasty offensive line. So when you add Jonathan Taylor, Ashton Jeanty into that, and then, Jahmyr Gibbs had 16 touchdowns. That was a stat I didn't read. 16 touchdowns. So between the two of them, they had 28 touchdowns this year. And then over the course of 2 years, their running backs have now combined for 51 touchdowns. That number is absolutely ridiculous between the running backs and just having the running back room. That doesn't even include any other running backs that might have gotten a touchdown over that time. So what the Lions have been able to do, and obviously what the Eagles are able to do, now they just have Saquon, Kenneth Gainwell a little bit, but Jalen Hurts as well. So their run game obviously effective. Offensive line, bullying people week in, week out. That's what we're going to have to turn into. That's what we're supposed to be with new blood coming in. That's what we need to turn into. We got to flip that switch, and turn into the team that bullies people each and every Sunday. Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Ashton Jeanty, the run game, it would be nasty. Okay, so again, this might be far-fetched to go get Ashton Jeanty, but it's what I've been thinking about. And the more I think about it, the more it's like, man, we kind of need to emulate what the good teams are doing. And the good teams are being able to run the ball and play good defense. We have to be able to do that. So obviously the defense has to get better. And it'll be where I think a lot of this hinges on is, what do we do in free agency? Who do we release to open up cap space? Do we move money around, right? Being able to restructure contracts. Who do we bring in free agency? At what positions do we bring them in? That'll obviously have, a large impact, and really the big impact on what we decide to do in the draft. But Ashton Jeanty, we're interviewing with him. We plan to sit down with him, doing our due diligence there. But nonetheless, it would be very interesting to see if this was a guy that we ended up bringing into the building. If we pick him at 14, the Colts Nation, man, Twitter's going to explode for Colts Nation if we picked a running back in the first round. But again, this is the case for it. I could see it being a great thing for us. Immediately right off rip, it wouldn't be great. But then you also have a succession plan for Jonathan Taylor, even if we do sign him for another 2 or 3 year contract, and then get Ashton Jeanty on his 5th year, and then do a contract after that when Jonathan Taylor is ready to be done or ready to move on, or whatever the case may be. Planning for the future, it's there. The idea is planted. The seed is in the ground. Watering, we'll see. Do we continue to water that as we go forward? We have other ideas, other things to talk about, so make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you have notifications on so you get notified anytime we have any videos dropping on this channel. Of course, I appreciate you stopping by for another video. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.